Hi, I'm Beverly Harzog. Welcome to Confessions of a Credit Junkie. I have a new book out by the same name. The subtitle is Everything You Need to Know to Avoid the Mistakes That I Made. And just as the subtitle implies, this is a book that kind of describes what I went through when I was a young adult and really just out of college. I got into a lot of trouble with credit cards. Okay, basically, I just didn't know what I didn't know. There was just a lot to know about credit cards. So, what I want to convey to you today is I want to talk to you about some of the mistakes I made because they're so easy to avoid if you just pay attention and know what you're doing. And I don't want this to ever happen to you. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I got out of college was I got a lot of credit card offers, and you'll see that this will happen to you too when you get out of college and you've got a job. Uh, you'll start getting all of these offers, and they're very enticing. The envelopes will say things like, "Oh, you've earned this, you deserve it." Okay. Well, I bought into all that, and I applied for a lot of credit cards. You know how many I had? 7. Right. Not smart, right? I applied for 7 cards. Uh, I, spent a lot of time shopping. I bought designer shoes, designer clothes. I was not making smart decisions about my money at all. After a couple of years, I was over $20,000 in debt. Okay. Fortunately, I did not have student loan debt because I paid my way through college, and I was able to scrape together the money I needed at the time to get through school. But these days, with so many of you getting out of college with student debt, you really don't want to get out with credit card debt as well. It will really set you back for years. So I just want to share a couple of things with you to keep in mind. And, most of you are too young for credit card right now, but it's never too early to learn and to think about it so that you're ready when the time comes. My very first mistake was applying for so many credit cards at one time. You've got something called a credit score. Okay, there are actually several credit scores. I'm not going to get into the details of that because I really would put you to sleep. But keep in mind that there is a credit score out there, and this is something very important. The better your score, the better interest rates you'll get when you get out into the world. Okay, when you want to get your first apartment, if you have a good credit score, they're going to look favorably on that. They might let you rent an apartment. Let's say, a couple of years down the road, you want a mortgage. Okay, if you've got a great credit score, you're going to get a better rate on that mortgage. And not only that, though, but a lot of people don't know that your credit score also helps you save money on life insurance, health insurance, and car insurance. And I know when you're young, you pay a lot for car insurance. I know because I have a 17-year-old and a 23-year-old. I know how much this costs for car insurance. It's very expensive. So if you pay attention to your credit score, have a good credit history, you'll save money on that. So right off the bat, when I started applying for all these credit cards, I didn't know, but every time I applied, my credit score was going down just a little bit. And if you do that a lot, I mean, you can really decrease your score that way. The other problem with applying for so many cards at one time is that I had no experience. So trust me on this, okay? When you first start getting credit card offers, okay, read everything very carefully. And if you decide you're ready for a card, and we're going to talk about in a few minutes how to decide if you're ready, only apply for one card and learn how to pay your bills on time. This is very important. I got to the point, because I had so much debt and so many cards, that I couldn't pay my bills on time. Okay, and this is what happens with credit card debt. When you start carrying a balance on a credit card, there's this thing called compound interest. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into too many details on that because that's going to bore you too. But let's just say that once you have a balance, you calculate, the credit card company will calculate interest on that balance, okay? So the next month you're still carrying, and you're also paying for interest, okay? And then they're calculating interest on the interest, okay? So this is how compound interest can get you into a mess a huge mess in a hurry. So don't go there, okay? When you get a card, you have to pay your bills on time. And there are so many ways these days to make sure that you pay your bill on time. There are so many smartphone apps. I use free money management software. It's called mint.com. There's an app for phones. And you can set up reminders for yourself. You can set up a budget. And look, when you're in college, even if you don't have a credit card, I recommend setting up Mint or something similar so that you get into the habit of tracking your spending and having a budget. That will save you a lot of heartache later on, trust me on this. So even without a credit card, if you've just got, an allowance, or you say you're working part-time, um, while you're going to school, most kids do that these days. It's so expensive, isn't it, to go to school? I mean, just books alone, you almost need a part-time job just to pay for your books, right? So listen, I understand, but make this a good habit right now. Follow, track your spending, set up a budget, get into that habit, and then by the time you get a credit card, you'll be in the flow of things. You'll understand your cash flow, how to plan ahead so that you can pay for something like that. So that's just very, very important to take care of your credit score that way. Pay your bills on time. Now, as long as you're tracking your spending, you don't have to worry, right, about going over budget, because you're going to stop if you have a card and you have a budget. Let's say you've decided to spend, let's say you've given yourself $75 you're going to spend because you need a new pair of tennis shoes or athletic shoes, okay? When you hit that amount for clothes, okay, that month, you stop spending. You put that card away and you step away from that card, okay? It takes a lot of discipline, but really, until you're to the point where you can do that, you don't want to, overspend, because let me tell you, once you overspend, it's a slippery slope. Like I talked about the compound interest. Once you carry a balance, it's easy to keep carrying. The shock value kind of goes away. I remember when I was in my 20s and, the first time I carried a balance, I was like, oh my goodness, what should I do about this? Well, I just kept spending. Wrong answer. Okay, wrong answer. I have since then learned how to control my spending. I'm no longer a shopaholic. And by the way, just a cute little aside note here, the title for my book, Confessions of a Credit Junkie, comes from the movie Confessions of a Shopaholic. I loved that movie. My daughter asked me to watch it with her. She was around 20 at the time and said, "You know, watch this movie, it's cute." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like fun." So I watched it with her and I realized during that movie, this was a couple of years ago, that Becky Bloomwood is the character. She's this major shopaholic and debt up to her eyeballs. And so I realized when I was watching this movie with my daughter Ashley that I was Becky Bloomwood. I had been her. I was reformed, a former credit cardaholic, but I had been her, and so I understood the situation she was in, and I thought, I really need to write a book about this and explain to people how to avoid all these problems. So that's where that came from. So one of the other mistakes I made, other than applying for so many credit cards, was never reading the fine print. Now, this is really boring. I admit it, okay? I review cards for a living. People send me emails, and I'm happy to do this for you when you're older and looking for a credit card, or if any of your parents are interested in a new card. I review cards on request, okay? It's just something that I do. I know how to read the fine print, and I spend a lot of time on it. So, when you are a little bit older and you're thinking about getting a card, read the fine print. You have to sit down, get a lot of light, because the fine print is indeed very small, okay? And just read over it. And if you've got any questions, send me an email. I have a contact form on my website, beverlyharzog.com, and it's up on the slide, my website address. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. If you have any questions about credit, I'm happy to answer that too. There are a lot of great student cards out there, and I've reviewed most of the top cards, so I can direct you to reviews for those cards as well if you have any questions. But reading the fine print, nobody wants to do it, but it has to be done. And there are things called rewards credit cards. Now, when you have excellent credit, you can actually make money from your credit cards. Now, there are a couple of rules to make this happen. Okay, you can't carry a balance because reward credit cards tend to have higher interest rates. Okay, because the credit card company is kind of giving some money away. They don't like to do that. Okay, and since so many people carry a balance, it usually works out in their favor at the end of the day. But you can be the one that actually makes money on your credit card by not carrying a balance. Like for instance, I have cashback cards. I have an airline miles card. So I get cash back on everyday expenses like groceries. I travel for free often, okay, or at very deep discounts because I have an airline miles card that I use quite a bit. So there's, when you get established and you've got great credit score, there's a way to actually make money from your cards, and you can look forward to that. But it all starts with establishing a great credit history. And remember, as I already mentioned, that great credit history, those good scores, helps you save in many areas of your life. Okay, and when you save in areas like health insurance and car insurance, things like that, you can put more money away in savings. You can put money away to save for a trip you want to take. There's all kinds of ways. Now with credit scores, I mean, it's not, I mentioned that when you open a lot of cards, it makes your credit scores go down. Another thing to keep in mind with credit scores and credit cards is that if you have a high balance on your card, remember I said I maxed out 7 credit cards, okay, and I was over 20 grand in debt. If you max out your cards, and that means, let's say you've got a credit limit, let's say it's $1,000. All right, and let's say you spend up to $900, okay, that's not good, okay. The credit card companies, they give you this credit limit, but they don't actually want you to use it, okay. So the way to have a great score is to keep your the amount of credit that you use kind of low, okay. So with $1,000 credit limit, don't have a balance more than $300, say, which would be 30%, or even lower if you're trying to increase your credit score. Credit scores are kind of, there's no black and white issue here. It's all very gray and very kind of mysterious. And so that's one reason why I spend a lot of time researching credit scores and learning about them. I'm currently taking a course to get to be a certified FICO Pro, which is the major credit score that's used by most credit card lenders. Because it's so confusing, and consumers, young people, anyone who doesn't have very much experience, it's hard to figure out what you're supposed to do in order to have a good credit score. So I spent a lot of time studying this and trying to write blog posts about this on my blog. But one of the ways to do this is keeping that balance kind of low. So when you do that and you pay your bill on time, you get a due date on a credit card, and you have something called a grace period. So when you buy something, let's say you get a new jacket, okay, or a new scarf, if you pay it by the due date on your statement, you've basically got an interest-free loan there, okay, because you're not going to pay interest expense if you pay on time by the due date. If you miss that due date, oh my goodness, okay, your credit score can really, really drop. And I'm not sure how low mine got during during my bad credit years, but it was not good. I couldn't get a credit card, okay. And credit cards are good to have. If nothing else, when you're older, for emergencies, a low interest credit card is a good thing to have. Okay, so we've talked about paying your bills on time. Another thing I want to touch on, since I mentioned most of you, a lot of you will have student loan debt. Now, if you get out of school and you've also got credit card debt, you are not going to have fun for a long time. Okay, when I had to pay off my credit card debt, and I did, I really, really cut back on my expenses. I couldn't go out with my friends anymore. Um, or very rarely. I used to go out weekly with friends. I was single at the time. We'd go out movie, dinners, whatever. I had to really cut back on that. I ate a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I did for dinner, just to save money. And every dime I saved, I would throw at my debt. Okay, but one of the reasons it got so bad, okay, was because I ignored it. I went into some severe denial. I really did. And I was scared. Okay, having a lot of debt is very scary. So, I just, I stopped going to my mailbox at one point. It was that bad, okay? And one day during lunch, I went home. I worked in an office. I was actually an accountant, which is kind of ironic, which is kind of also similar to Becky Bloomwood because she was a finance journalist, which during the movie I thought that was really funny until I made the connection with myself. But so one day I went home for lunch and I ran into my mailman, and I lived in an apartment complex, and so it was just like a little box, and it was stuffed, and he goes, I thought you'd moved because I can't get any more mail in your box. So he gave me all my mail, um, forced me to, seeing everything, it forced me to sit down and think about what was going on. That, in fact, just a couple of days after that, I tried to use a department store card that I had, which was my very first card, which was basically a symbol of freedom to me. I was trying to buy, what else? Some designer jeans, okay? And but my card got declined. I couldn't believe it, okay? I'd had this card for so long, and I'm like, gosh, there must be some mistake. And they go, no, ma'am, your card has been rejected. You'll have to call customer service and ask about it. So the next day I did, and they said, ma'am, we've had to cut you off. You're over your limit. You're not paying your bills on time. Sorry. So that was really kind of the kick in the stomach that I needed. That and finally seeing all my mail to sit down and straighten out my life. Don't let it get to that. Okay, you don't have to let it get to that, okay? Because once it gets to that, you have to suffer for a little while. It took me 2 years to get out of debt. So, one thing I do want to um, be sure you understand, if you end up in credit card debt, and people are human, we're all human and we all make mistakes. If you end up in debt, talk to your parent, okay? Talk to, a friend who has experience with this. Talk to a counselor at school. Talk to somebody, okay? Because there's help out there. There are credit counseling organizations that will give you a free phone consultation to help you decide what your next step should be. So you don't have to go it alone. I'm hoping that none of you end up in that situation, okay? But I'm just telling you, it's not something that you have to keep inside because it just gets worse. It doesn't magically go away, okay? I just went into some severe denial, and while I was ignoring the debt, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it takes longer to pay off. So, so my advice is, if it does happen to you, own up to it, take responsibility for what's happened, but then take steps. Talk to somebody, take steps. There are a lot of really good personal finance websites online, a lot of them targeted to young people, like dailyworth.com. There were just a lot of them that would be very, very helpful if you've got some issues. But again, don't keep it to yourself. Take steps, get some help. The other thing I'd like to convey to you is how important it is to have some kind of financial goal. And you're thinking, "Oh, okay, well, I'm about to start college. Why do I need to worry about this? I just need to get through my classes." That's true. Okay, that is your priority. But as you're working, and if you do have student loan debt, you want to think about what you want in life. Okay, and believe it or not, this is going to help you stay out of debt. Okay, it's going to help you. If you do have a credit card, and you're thinking about having a pizza party because you could put it on the card, um, think about what you want in the future, and maybe that'll help you not overspend right now. Because when you get out and you go on job interviews, you're going to need some nice clothes for that, clothes that you haven't been wearing as a college student. There are just all kinds of things. You might want to take a little trip when you get out of college to reward yourself. Think about good stuff, and uh, having a little emergency fund, because I know a lot of college students. I know I didn't have a great car when I was in college. A lot of students have older cars. These might need repairs. um, all kinds of things can happen. So no matter how young you are, it's good to have a little bitty cushion, just like a little emergency fund, to have in your pocket, just for those situations, so you don't get totally wiped out, if an emergency happens. And there's another connection I want to talk to you about in terms of financial aid, because this week is really all about financial aid, and credit cards. Um, a lot of young people over the last few years, since the Credit Card Act came out, and just quickly, the Credit Card Act changed the rules about how young people can get credit cards. Okay, so if you're under 21, you have to show that that you have the income sufficient to repay a credit card debt in order to get a card. If you don't have any income that you can show, you have to have a cosigner. And a lot of parents are reluctant to do this for good reasons. It can, it's a sticky situation to cosign. I've seen it ruin relationships. I've seen it work, okay, but it takes, it takes a lot of maturity, writing down the rules, and a lot of communication to make it work. But I have seen a lot of students kind of desperate for a card put down their financial aid as a source of income. And this isn't really being checked by the credit card issuers. And technically, I guess you could say, oh, well, this is income I'm receiving, but that is for school. Okay, so if you're putting that down on a credit card application in order to get a credit card, this can really come back to, not in a good way. Okay, it can really come back to haunt you. Because once you get the card, if you need the card because you think you're having money problems with money and meeting your current needs, a credit card is not your answer, okay? Because you're going to end up carrying a balance in that situation, and that pizza that cost you $15 a year later is going to still be costing you, okay? It's just not worth it. And this is how I've seen some kids get out of college with student loan debt and credit card debt, because they got mired in this kind of situation. So if you've got student loan debt, please, please do not put that down as a source of income. If you've got a part-time job and you feel ready to handle having a credit card, that's fine. I still suggest you talk to a parent, talk to somebody at school, send me a question on my website. I'm happy to help. Just be sure that you understand how credit cards work, and that you have to have a mechanism in place so that you pay your bill on time, and that you're able to pay it in full. Do not carry balance. Golden rule on credit cards. Okay, so that's just very, very important. Now, okay, are you ready for a credit card? Okay, in my book, Confessions of a Credit Junkie, I actually have this cute little quiz to help people decide what kind of card they need. But I can tell you already that, you would, anyone who is new to credit has to go through certain steps. You're not going to qualify for a rewards card unless maybe it's a Discover student card. Okay, so there are certain steps you're going to have to go through in order to qualify for great cards. And this is where, thinking ahead and thinking, okay, my credit history and my credit score, it's very, very important. I need that good foundation now so that I can save money on other things later, like insurance, and I can get better deals on a mortgage. I can get better deals on a car loan. I can qualify to rent an apartment. See how it all ties in together? And this is how thinking ahead, helps just a little bit. If you think you're ready for a credit card, some of them, the city used to be pretty strict about this. I'm not sure if they still are, uh, about how, even if you wanted a student card, they don't allow cosigners. You would need to qualify on your own. But many cards do allow cosigners if your parents were so inclined or a family friend. But again, if you go that route, I beg you, sit down, okay, and write out how much you can spend on the card and keep that low balance in mind, okay, where you want to keep it 30% or below of your credit limit. And just, have some rules in place. When is the payment due? And you may not know this, but you can actually kind of fiddle around with when the payment is due by calling the credit card company and saying, I get paid on the 10th. So maybe my credit card could be due on the 15th or the 16th. Just make sure you've got money in your account. So you can actually work with them. They're flexible on these kinds of things. So you can make it work with your cash flow. And this is important if you're going to set up automatic payments from a bank account, which you can do. And then you don't have to worry about forgetting to make the payment. But you have to be sure that the money's in the account, because that can cause you to have a late fee if you can actually pay the bill. Okay, and then sometimes these things get reported to the credit bureaus. There are 3 major credit bureaus, and they keep a credit report, which is different from a credit score. Okay, and if you're late on a payment, you might get reported to the credit bureau. This brings down your credit score. So see how it all kind of interacts. It all interacts together. Okay. But so you just, you have to pay attention to things like that when you have a credit card. Now, let's say you don't qualify. Let's say you have no credit whatsoever. You do have a part-time job. But let's say for whatever reason, the credit card company says, no, we're not ready to take a chance on you yet. You can think about a secured credit card. Now, what's a secured credit card? Okay, this looks exactly like an unsecured credit card. Except, which is just a regular credit card that you see your parents, and other people using at the stores. A secured credit card means that you put a deposit that will usually be the amount of your credit limit, depends on the card. Let's say you put a $300 deposit into a bank, you get a $300 credit limit. Okay, you get a credit card in the mail. It looks like any other credit card, and you use that credit card to buy things. You're actually buying on credit. That $300 deposit that you put in the bank, that stays there. Okay, so you're not using the money from that account. No, that stays there, and it secures the card for you. Okay, so the credit card issuer thinks, okay, I've got $300 of this person's money, so I can give them this card to use. If they don't pay me back, if they don't pay for their purchases, the credit card company gets to keep your deposit. Okay, so that's how this thing works. But the good thing is the best cards report to all 3 credit bureaus, so this helps you build a credit history. So you actually build a credit history. It's kind of like having a credit card on training wheels. That's what I like to refer to it. But that's a great way to establish credit. I've got a lot of my blog readers that use secured credit cards to rebuild credit. During the recession, a lot of people lost their jobs, and often through no fault of your own, you can find yourself in a situation where your credit score is kind of trashed and you need to rebuild. So I just want to let you know that a secured card is also a great tool for that. So you could get a secured credit card and build credit that way. I happen to have on my site, my most popular blog post is the best and worst secured credit cards. I've got a list of over 20 cards, and I have them ranked, and I have reviews on them. So I can tell you which cards are the best, which cards are easiest to get, but still don't have too many fees. And then I've also got a list of the worst credit cards possible, okay, that you're going to want to stay away from. And you won't believe it, but some of these have interest rates like 30%. Okay, it's, when you're starting out there, people will take advantage of you, and one reason why I wanted to write my book. I wanted people to avoid the mistakes I made for sure, but I also wanted to empower people with knowledge that they don't get taken advantage of. They know how to be their own advocate, their own consumer advocate in a way. Now, another thing you could do if you don't feel like you're ready for a secured card and you'll need to talk to a parent or, a close family friend, someone who has great credit and perhaps become an authorized user on their account. Many of you probably are already in this situation with a parent. Now, this is not as sticky a situation as a cosigner situation is, because with the cosigner, okay, let's say a parent cosigns on a card with you. If you mess up and don't pay your bills on time or max out your credit card and your credit score gets trashed, guess what? Your parent or whoever co-signed the card with you, their credit score goes down too. They're legally liable for the debt, and they also get the same damage you get. Although if they've got a great score, their score is going to drop a whole lot more. The better your score, the more you drop when you mess up. Because, if you've already got a low score, you don't have that far to drop. But so that's why it's kind of sticky. Co-signing, it's not something that I recommend as first choice. In special situations, it can work. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. But now with an authorized user, this means that you get a credit card. It's actually your parent or, friend's account, whoever, wants to give you this card, and they have excellent credit. They are not legally responsible if you do not behave properly. Okay, let's just put it that way. You're not going to drag them down. They can take you off as an authorized user, and although it could temporarily impact their score, they'll bounce back pretty quickly once you're removed as an authorized user. So it doesn't do long-term damage to the parent's score. But this gives you a chance to use a credit card, learn how it operates. Your parent can check on the credit card. They can put constraints on how much you can spend. There are just a lot of ways to help you ease into the situation of a credit card. Now, do you need a credit card at all? There are some people that don't have credit cards at all. That's perfectly fine. I see credit cards, and the reason I spend so much time, and it's my mission in life to be sure people use them properly. The reason I like credit cards is that they're a money management tool, but they can be dangerous. So it's a money management tool that can help you have a great credit score. It's nice to have when you're out on your own and you've got a home, maybe family. It's nice to have a low interest credit card that you can keep around in case you have an emergency. I recently needed a new roof. Okay, oh my goodness, I ended up with some giant holes in my kitchen. It was awful, and it was right before Christmas, and I had to have this work done, and insurance is going to help us out with it, not completely though. And because during the holidays and all, I put it on a low interest credit card, knowing that I could pay it off the next month. But it was nice to know that I had this temporary little bridge to help me out. It wasn't going to cost me a fortune to do this because of the unfortunate timing. I also have a kid in college. I have another one going to college in the fall. So I like having credit as my backup, as my emergency backup. And I mentioned I also profit from my cards. Now, who should not have a credit card? Okay, I mentioned my credit card quiz that I have in my book. There's one personality that I have called the walking disaster. Okay, I'm a fan of The Walking Dead, so that gave me the idea of a walking disaster. Because trust me, when you get into credit card debt, it does feel like you do feel like a zombie a little bit, honestly. So the walking disaster is someone who maxes out their cards. They don't pay their bills on time. They're not tracking their spending. And a lot of that can be learned, because remember I said that, I did all these things and I came back from it, and now I'm actually a credit card expert, okay? But what happened to me was that I spent some time learning personal finance. I knew corporate finance, okay, but that was not the same thing as personal finance. There's an emotional element that comes into spending when you're a shopaholic. Okay, and I was a shopaholic. Part of it though was because I didn't have a system in place to control my spending. At the time, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. And I was in the workplace. Back then, I was working with mostly men in an office, in a finance department. And so, I felt like, okay, I need some really credible clothes. But I overspent. I spent on designer clothes, designer shoes, power lunches, you name it, I was spending. But as I became more confident in myself, and oddly enough, as I learned more about personal finance and about credit and how to set up a budget and how to track my spending, it actually became kind of fun. I felt empowered. I was in control of my money. It wasn't in control of me. I was controlling my credit cards and my money, and that felt great. But if you're a person who can't get to that point, let's say you try to empower yourself with knowledge, you keep getting into debt. If it becomes a pattern for you and you really can't control your spending, then maybe credit cards are not right for you, okay? And everybody makes mistakes, so I wouldn't say if you get into debt one time, that means, cut off the cards. But whenever you get into debt, step away from the cards. If you find you cannot control the spending, some counseling might help. There's probably a reason why you're spending. Like I said, there's usually an emotional component. But step away from the cards if you can't, um, you know, if you can't develop the habit of using them responsibly, keeping a low balance, paying the bill in full by the due date. And there's no shame in that, okay? We all have different things that we're not good at, or that, different shortcomings, okay? So if you make that decision, that's perfectly fine, okay? So I just wanted to share some of these things with you because, you know, credit cards can be a great tool, but be sure that you're ready, okay? And be sure you understand what can happen if you mess up. And, it's not pretty when you mess up. It takes a while. It really takes a while to recover. But do remember what I said. If something happens and you mess up, talk to somebody. Don't pretend it'll go away. Don't be ashamed. Talk to somebody, because as soon as you start taking steps to fix it, things will get better. Okay. So are there any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. One question that I tend to get a lot about secured credit cards is that deposit, because many young people will go the route of the secured credit card. I mentioned that you would put a $300 deposit down in an account. Now, when you're ready to move on to an unsecured card, and if you use the card responsibly, it could take around 12 to 18 months to develop a decent credit score. And keep in mind that when you have zero credit, when you're starting from scratch, it can take 6 months to even generate a credit score. Okay, so don't worry if you try to check your credit scores and you don't have one. That just means that you haven't had enough credit yet to even have a score. When somebody says, "Oh, I have zero credit score," it's not. They have no credit score. There's no such thing. Okay, but so when you develop a good enough credit score with a secured credit card, some of the credit card companies will graduate you to an unsecured card. Not all of them, but some of them will. Or you'll get to the point where you can apply for an unsecured card that doesn't require deposit and get approved. So when you get to that point, what happens to that deposit? Well, you get it back, okay? Every credit card issuer has a certain procedure, certain steps you'll have to go through. So you'll just follow those steps, and it can take a little while to get it back. But as long as you've been a great card holder and you've paid all your bills and you've got a zero balance, they'll send you the deposit back when you're ready to close the account and move on. So, to me, a secured credit card, as long as it's not one of the ones that I have said are the worst cards, it's pretty much a win-win for everybody involved. Another question. people ask about the credit report. I know it can get really confusing with the credit report and the credit score. The credit report is something that each bureau keeps on you, and it's actually, you can get it online for free from each bureau every 12 months. I do this. I spread it out to every 4 months. I get one from each of the bureaus. And so that allows me to kind of look at my credit report and see if everything looks okay. The reason I'm bringing this up, because I'm sure you've heard of all the credit card hackings that have gone on. The Target, where people's credit card accounts got stolen, and people stole their account numbers, and they started making fraudulent purchases using their cards. And man, what a hassle this can be. So as you get a little bit older and you start developing a credit score, you start checking your credit reports, and you can do that at any point. You can do that now, with the help of a parent. It's annualcreditreport.com. You can check, and it's a great way to, kind of make sure that you haven't been the victim of identity theft. So, that's another habit that you want to get into early on. Okay, well, are there any more questions? All right, well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really enjoyed talking to you, and keep in mind, I'm happy to help you with any questions you might have at beverlyharzog.com. So everybody have a good day, and I hope to hear from you sometime. Bye-bye.